A Norwegian court has sentenced Anders Breivik to 21 years in prison for the killing of 77 people in twin terrorist attacks in July last year. Judges had been considering whether to deem Breivik mentally sound or insane, in which case he would have been sent to a psychiatric ward instead of to prison. The 5 judges were unanimous in ruling that Breivik was sane. Well, for more on this, I'm joined from London now by our Europe correspondent, Philip Williams. Good evening, Phil. Can you tell us what you've learnt about the judgment so far?
Well, it's a 90-page judgment. It's still being read out. It will take several hours and 2 judges take it in turns to read it out. But the basis of it really is that he's sentenced to 21 years, a minimum sentence of 21 years, although parole can be looked at after 10 years. Now, that's a technicality. Given the severity of the crimes, it's almost certain he won't be considered for that. And even after 21 years, he can still be held if he's deemed a threat to society. So it's likely he'll spend the next couple of decades in jail and possibly longer. The idea of him being ever let loose in Norwegian society again after what he's done seems remote, but who knows, in a couple of decades perhaps so. If he'd been declared insane or medically impaired, then he could have actually got out a lot earlier, because he could have argued he was not clinically sane, and therefore he's now cured, and in a few years' time he could perhaps argue that he could be let out. He didn't want that because he said he wanted to basically give veracity to his claims that he was protecting society against multiculturalism, particularly against a Muslim invasion of Norwegian and European society, and therefore if he'd been insane, those would be dismissed, and now that he's declared sane, that he is actually now regarded, his ramblings, his 1,500-page manifesto and what he said afterwards have some validity. Now, that's in his own mind. He now goes to a cell, specially prepared 3-roomed structure that's been built for him, because he has to be separated from other prisoners. Obviously, they may want to harm him, and he'll spend his days there for the next couple of decades, most likely. The key element, the key objection for many people is that he has a computer there, an internet connection, and is able to communicate with the world, talking to supporters and continuing his campaign against a multicultural society, and that's what many people find very objectionable.
OK, these proceedings are still continuing in the courtroom. Phil, can you just explain for us how the day has panned out for Anders Breivik so far?
Well, he was brought into the courtroom a short while ago, and the verdict was read out straight away. I guess because they didn't want that 2 or 3 hours of anticipation and leading up to the verdict. So now we're getting the backstory of how we got to this point, detailing his childhood, detailing the breakup of his family when he was very young, detailing his scams that he operated, selling fake diplomas in which he earned a lot of money and sent money offshore to an offshore in the Caribbean. All sorts of details of his life that led up to the point where he meticulously planned this attack. Remembering, this was not some harebrained scheme that he hatched over a couple of weeks and then went out and did. This was something that he had planned for many months, possibly years beforehand, especially hired a farm, leased a farm so that he could legitimately be seen to get fertiliser, which created the bomb, which he used as a diversion, got the police uniform, various elements of the police uniform, buying from all sorts of different sources around in 8 different countries to basically make it look as though he was a policeman, went to Utoya Island with these arms, which he had legitimately bought. These were not illegally bought arms, and slaughtered the children on the island, mainly young people on the island.
Phil, I've seen reports today that indicate that about 3/4 of Norwegians believe that Anders Breivik belongs in a jail and not in a mental institution. Despite that, this finding by the court is actually what he wanted, isn't it?
Yes, it's bizarre, isn't it, that he wanted to be declared sane. If he'd been declared insane, that would have given him a pathway out of jail earlier, possibly. but he wanted that validity for his crazy thoughts and his theories about domination of Europe by the Muslims. This is all part of his plan. When he went to Utoya Island and slaughtered those young people, he wanted to be caught. He wanted to be caught alive. He wanted the trial. He wanted the platform to spread his what he's regarded as warnings about what was happening. He regards himself as a hero, as a martyr, as basically trying to wake up the nation to what's going on. And the fact that he is declared sane and in jail plays right into his hands. However, ironically, that's what most Norwegians want. They didn't want him given the out, in a sense, of being declared insane and that possibility of being then therefore cured later on and let out into society again. So both sides are apparently happy with that result. That question mark, though, remains over his access to the internet and his ability to communicate with like-minded souls around the world, which he has done, and that causes huge offence, particularly to the survivors and those whose loved ones were killed by him.
What's likely to be the impact of this outcome across Norway, given that there's been other repercussions of that awful day over a year ago, with the Norwegian National Police Commissioner stepping down earlier this month as a result of a litany of failures found by an independent report into the police response to the twin attacks?
Yes, he was a casualty too. It was decided in that report that the police had acted far too slowly and got to Utoya Island far too slowly, and many more lives could have been saved had they reacted more quickly. Even Breivik himself said he was surprised at how slowly they'd got there. He'd expected them within an hour. He had an hour and a half to systematically walk around that island, shooting people at will and not challenge. In the end, it was he who called the police and said, "I'm ready to give myself up." Extraordinary stuff. But basically what this has done, ultimately, is galvanised the Norwegian people. In a recent poll, more new Norwegian people now favour multiculturalism and look favourably towards migration than they did before. More Norwegians are proud of their origins and proud of their Norwegianness than they were before. So in a sense, it's worked exactly the opposite to what he had hoped would happen. He wanted effectively this to be a spark for some sort of revolution where there was the political classes, particularly the Labour Party, people would be put in jail, possibly even executed for what he regarded as crimes allowing multiculturalism. That, of course, is a diatribe that he can continue from his cell because of the internet connection. But of course he's off the streets, he can't set bombs, but he can still inspire others in his current situation, even though he's locked away for the next couple of decades at least.
Is he ever likely to be released, Phil?
It's hard to see how, isn't it? He would be regarded, and rightly, as a complete monster that had wreaked such terrible pain on this country. I don't think in 21 years' time people are going to be willing to forgive or forget. And if he's regarded as a threat still to society, and if he still continues his stance, then I'm sure he'll be kept in jail. It's very difficult to imagine a scenario where he would be allowed out of jail ever, in fact.